Grayson, welcome in to the Matt Mosley Show. How are you, sir?
Doing great, doing great. Just never stop working right now. It has been extremely busy.
This is a wild time, and you know what? If you want to be like Schefter and kind of look at your phone and break some news during the Mosley Show, I think that's totally
There
fine. We would
actually is
welcome
some
that. Yeah.
news, Mosley, that
Okay.
actually just happened. So it's an interesting story that I've been trying to track down for a while since Baylor hired their new defensive line coach, Ja'Cory Greer. And so the big name that happened was Ezekiel Durham Campbell, the Coastal Carolina edge. He entered the transfer portal. Steve Wiltfong just reported that he entered. He actually followed Greer from Louisiana Tech to Coastal Carolina. And so the thought is it would kind of make sense if he wanted to jump up a level from Coastal Carolina, the G5 level, to the Power 4 level, that Baylor would make a lot of sense. And maybe he wants to follow Greer to Baylor. He had 5.5 sacks a year ago, 2 forced fumbles. So he would definitely fill a pretty big need if Baylor was able to get him at the edge position. So that's kind of the most breaking thing. Obviously, they got commitment this morning as well, which I'm sure we're going to talk about. Now they got 3 commits, but that was definitely some big news that I'm sure all Baylor fans need to keep an eye on here.
Okay, this is what we need you for, Grayson. I think Baylor fans are borderline despondent as I was even checking your latest worry-o-meter. I like
Yeah.
how you, I like, and I think you probably will go back soon and update the running back position with Bryson Washington leaving. I think they probably, with Bryson and Caden and Michael Turner and everything, had enough. There he is up on the screen. Bryson Washington probably had enough to think that position was covered. That has changed, but that's a good one, Grayson. In fact, I'm retweeting that as we speak. The Coastal Carolina edge, Zeke Campbell. That's a good one. And as Grayson just said, he'll be one to watch with his close ties to the new Baylor defensive line coach, Ja'Cory Greer. I think, Grayson, the hardest part right now is I think everybody, and the 2 of us included, were, you can't, like, if you can't stand a team, and obviously Baylor fans mostly wanted a change at head coach, but you can't, like, be shocked when you lose a ton of people in the portal. I just think, and I think you and I knew the number could get up around, 25 to 30. I just think this is new for Baylor because, good or bad, Baylor's been pretty decent about holding on to their rosters. This may not have been a roster you wanted to hold on too much, but you are seeing some front line type players. And again, there weren't that many of them, but leaving the Bears, Winston, one of them, Bryson Washington. I think people would like to hear from you, Grayson, like the Washington departure. Where was your surprise level at that? Did you think that was somebody they would be able to hold on to, or did you just think, hey, you're starting to see some running backs get huge money out there? Where was your surprise level on that news?
So I think the point that you just made about how Baylor's been able to retain the roster, that is very true. That's been a staple for Dave Aranda and this staff. It's been something that they've really been, trying to push towards. And you saw it with high school recruiting, right? They wanted to build that way, where you're recruiting guys out of high school, you're able to develop them, you're able to, turn them into, kind of your star players, in the long term. This year, they had to change that strategy, right? Because they have to win now. Like, if they don't win next year, they're not going to be there. And so for that reason, they had to change some things up, and you have to value different positions. You have to value guys differently, and guys who are getting maybe a certain amount last year aren't getting the same amount this year. And that's going to obviously cause some tension. That's going to cause some guys to leave. And heading into the portal season, I felt like 30 plus transfer portal guys was not going to be very difficult to get to. They're at 29 right now, so they're definitely going to get over that 30 number. It's just the reality of college football right now, and it's the reality of Baylor football. They have to change some things up. They have to put value on different positions, and they have to figure out how they're going to make their budget work to where they can actually form a well-rounded roster. Now, as far as Bryson Washington goes, this is not a guy that Baylor wanted to lose. This is not a guy that Baylor was making a lot of changes with. This was not a guy that they were they wanted him. He was in their plans for this year and for the future. So losing him is really difficult. I also think from, looking from the outside in, it's a really difficult one to lose as well, right? Fan perception is just going to be like, wow, the streak continues, all of this, and it just becomes a pile-on effect. But and Bryson's going to end up at a really good spot. I think Ole Miss, I've heard A&M linked to him. Like, he's going to end up at a really, really good program, and that's going to frustrate people. But for Baylor, I mean, you look at their room. I mean, they get Dawson Pendergrass back. They have Caden Knighton. They have Michael Turner. They're bringing in Rylan Morris. They'll probably bring in a transfer to kind of round out the room a little bit after the departure of Bryson Washington and Joseph Dodds. But this isn't a position that you look at and go, wow, this is a huge need for Baylor. This is a position that is going to make or break their season. I don't view it that way. And so losing Bryson is really hard. It definitely hurts your upside at the position. But I think in general, Baylor can still get by with the room that they have, assuming they don't have freak injury luck, which unfortunately they had this year. They had so many injuries in that room, and that's not really common. I mean, the year before, Bryson and Dawson were healthy the entire year. So definitely got to put that into perspective as well. But it's a really tough one optically, and losing a leader like that is really difficult, especially after you also lost Keaton Thomas a little bit earlier in the transfer portal season.
Okay, what about some of the others? Colton, I mean, sometimes you don't totally, I mean, I think you valued him, but isn't it interesting to look out there and go, a lot of people have him ranked as like the top first or second best interior offensive lineman. He ends up at Kentucky. Winston obviously has gone in the portal. I think what you've indicated is the D-line, that's your biggest worry. And they're going to have to be aggressive, and they're going to have to look in a lot of different areas. And that's going to be, I mean, I think it's hard also to watch. I mean, it's like Texas Tech. Think about it. We're only like 2 years removed. We're 1 year removed from actually beating Tech at Tech, right? And probably at that point, nobody looked at Baylor and Tech and thought, oh, Tech's like way ahead. In 1 year's time, it feels like they're like not even in the same stratosphere. They're like on a different planet. So I think it's hard you see all these departures and you're like, oh, Jackie Marshall's not going to be back. Who in the world are they going to line up with? That to me, from what I've read, from what you've been writing, Grayson, that's your biggest worry is how are you going to build a defensive line? And by the way, even the defensive line you had last year was not a very good one.
Right. And that is my biggest concern. And they haven't done anything quite yet to really address that. I think there's some positive news here. I just mentioned, Zeke Campbell would be a terrific addition if they're able to get him on campus for a visit and actually, land a guy from a coach that, is coming from that school. We haven't seen them do that with Kansas State yet, but there's still an opportunity out there with Ryan Davis, the edge from there. So, if you're able to get those two guys, they have a Western Kentucky edge visiting this weekend as well. I mean, they could fix that group pretty quickly and actually feel pretty good about the guys they have in that room. But the interior of the defensive line is where I am very, very concerned. I mean, you find out Jackie Marshall doesn't have eligibility. He's going on to the NFL. You lose just kind of guys who were on the team last year who maybe didn't perform, but you're still losing bodies. You're losing guys with experience like a Cooper Lands. You're hoping that a guy, like Samu Taumanu Pepe can maybe take that step forward, but he was hurt, out of shape all last year. So you're kind of just betting on that. And so you look to the transfer portal and you're like, man, you got to take a bunch of guys here. You really only have a couple rotation guys. And the ones that I think of in that role, specifically is Devontae Tizino. If they hold on to him, I think he can play as part of the rotation. But outside of that, man, it's a lot of question marks, and they're going to have to find bodies to put in there, and quality bodies as well. I mean, we're talking about starting quality guys. They're going to have to find those type of players. I'm very curious how they do that because, Joe Klanderman does value his defensive front, and he wants those guys to actually be able to create pressure and get into the backfield and cause havoc. In order to do that, you got to have some talented guys. And right now, they haven't quite put themselves in position for that. I do expect it to change because, again, they're going to value it. And if you have the money to value a certain position, you're going to have some hits. And ultimately, I think Baylor will get to that point. It's just been a little slow after the very first weekend. Again, it's the very first weekend. I wouldn't push the panic button quite yet on that.
Okay, we've seen Colorado and others bring in enormous numbers in the portal. Where do you project Baylor's got to bring in? I mean, like you say, it's like when they need 30 new players or somewhere in that neighborhood, 25 to 30 or so. I mean, when you know there need to be huge numbers, and like you said, you see them get off to a fairly slow start, and I think they have 3 and then hopefully more on the way. Is that about the right projection? How many do they need to have in this portal class?
I think that's pretty difficult to answer at this time. I would think it's going to be above 30, but my reasoning that I say that is because we saw last year, I mean, they just started adding bodies at the end there. I mean, just special teams guys. So it's like hard to account for those types. I would say that they're probably looking for, I would say somewhere between 20 and 25 guys who are actually going to be in and around the 2 deep, from starters to depth chart guys, somewhere along those lines. Then you might have some filler as well. But I specifically am looking at those spots that they're looking to fill. They've already got 3 of those type of guys, which is a good start. It's an okay start. I wouldn't say it's a great start, obviously. And they have a lot of work to do, but they are having a steady stream of visitors. And I think that's important as well, because regardless of how many guys they landed on the first weekend, you really want them to land the guys that they prioritize. And so I think that's going to be the more fascinating part as this week unfolds. You might not have gotten the first visit from a guy, and maybe you're getting the second or third visit. And so you're still giving yourself a great chance to land a guy, especially if they don't commit on that first weekend. So there's still plenty of options out there, but you're right. I mean, they have a lot of work to do. And really they need to get this done so that guys can enroll for spring football. So you don't have a ton of time to figure that out. I assume it's got to be done probably by the end of this month. So we're talking like 3 weeks to get this kind of solidified. That's kind of what they're looking at right now, which, it's an uphill battle. There's no doubt about it, but there's also a ton of guys in the portal. It's just really about the quality of those guys and how well do you evaluate. And we've seen that's been a problem, for Baylor's evaluations. And we saw it last year, and they got to correct that this year.
All right. People want to know, Grayson, your take on quarterback, because Walker White has hit the portal. We know who Baylor has left. TCU just brought in a quarterback from Harvard, kind of an interesting prospect there. Hoover goes to it. And again, this Indiana coach, Signetti, has so much credibility now that, like, whoever they land, right? I mean, we know a lot about Hoover. We've seen him. He's good, but he'll be immediately like one of the number 1 Heisman candidates next year, because in that program, and obviously some of the numbers he's put up, is Baylor, DJ Lagway. I've read what you've said about him. I have been in contact with DJ's father, who played at Baylor. And the problem, of course, is Sorsby sets the market. Tech has set the market now at $5 million. I mean, you'd think DJ Lagway is he's gonna want at least somewhere in the $2 to $3 million range. And Baylor's in that. We just talked about it. You got to look at your numbers and go, well, if we spend $2 or $3 million on a quarterback, that really cuts down on some of the things we can do in other areas. Where do you think Baylor is at quarterback? And is there a group of, like 5 people? I mean, I even looked at, I thought they might take a peek at the guy who got hurt at Oklahoma State, and they didn't. It didn't seem like Hoss Haney, who was going to end up at Colorado State with Jim Mora. And again, his problem has been staying healthy. He's got tons of talent. He's got tons of speed. But from what I could tell, Baylor didn't even take a peek at him.
So I would say the ones that have kind of, I guess, made sense or been most linked to Baylor from just a long-term standpoint are, as you mentioned, DJ Lagway, out of Florida. Georgia Southern quarterback J.C. French has been linked to them as well. He's put up some good numbers over the last 2 years. He's a good player, G5 guy. So, he would have to take a step up in level of competition, but also would have, in theory, better pieces around him. The other one is, of course, Ashton Daniels, who visited on the first weekend. He was at Auburn. He was the backup for Auburn. He played in multiple games at the end of the year. He played pretty well against Vanderbilt and Alabama to close the season. He's more of your runner. He's a really good runner, really good athlete, has been inconsistent throwing the football, but he does give you something from a leadership and experience standpoint. So I can see why they brought him in on that first visit. He and French would be cheaper options. There's also Mercer quarterback Braden Atkinson. He had really good numbers this year for Mercer. My issue with him is he's got a lot of years of eligibility. I think he was just a freshman last year. That doesn't, I think, fit with Baylor's timeline unless you're kind of just saying, you know, you're basically moving on a little bit from your room at that point. If you're going to bring in a guy that's that young with that many years ahead of him, whereas French and Daniels, it's like they got 1 year, so you know what it is, right? They're going to come in, they're going to play this year, and then you're going to let your room develop for 1 more year and then roll with that group. And then of course DJ's got 2 years left. He would clearly make the most sense, and he would make people, I think, the most happy, right? But I think for DJ to be good at Baylor, the team has to be really good. And so for the team to be really good, you're going to not want to spend all of your money on the quarterback position. And I think the longer this drags out, the probably better it is for Baylor, because you're seeing these spots get filled up. I mean, you're seeing Tech get filled up. LSU's probably going to get filled up here in a little bit by Sam Levitt. You're just seeing Missouri got filled up, which was a school linked to him. There was another one that got filled up too that was linked to DJ. And so now it's just Florida State, who brought in 3 quarterbacks yesterday, I think. So they're going to have to make a decision on what they're going to do at the position. Then DJ is going to visit Virginia, which, I mean, maybe he goes to Virginia. They had a good year this year, but I feel like that I don't know. I feel like that would be a bit of a long shot, but who knows if the money works out there. And then of course he's looking at visiting Baylor probably at the end of this week. So I find it to be a fascinating situation for Baylor, and fascinating to see what direction they go. I think Baylor fans would be really happy if they landed DJ Lagway. It would give this program a much needed boost, some spark. But I also understand that you want to build a complete roster. And if you can't do that with DJ, then I understand potentially going in another direction. Personally, I think they should find a way to get DJ to Baylor, because I just think it makes too much sense.
Yeah. But the money they would spend, I mean, I keep coming back to that. Yeah. And he had tons of talent around him. It may not have been the right talent, I don't know, but it's not like, you know, Florida wasn't recruiting and bringing in big time players. And he was very hit or miss there. But you're totally right. If you spend it's a catch-22. If you spend $3 million on him or $2 million or whatever, and you can't really surround him with much, and he doesn't really have an O-line, I mean, he can move fine. I mean, last time I talked to his dad, you know, he was really talking about how he was going to slim down and get pretty trim, and that would even help more with his athleticism and everything. But I get what you're saying. Like, Baylor needs a win. Like, this would represent a huge win. The problem is, Grayson, as you know as well as all these players and their agents, they know the score. They know Dave Aranda's total lame duck status. And so they either have a 1 year, piece it together and maybe win 7 or 8 wins and decide, well, let's keep going with him. Or what happens is kind of what we expect to happen is Doug McNamee takes a look at it, realizes that there's not much momentum with the program, and they need to get a new coach in. And I think most people are still in that mindset of, why didn't you do this before? And then of course, we know the answers to that. We know the stuff with Mac. I mean, the whole thing is just like it's you know, you just got to piece your way through it. Now, you are someone who looks at a lot of these players. You also look at the high school recruiting as well. Is there anybody out there that Baylor has at least targeted? I'm talking about in the portal, that kind of maybe below the radar that excites you at any position. It could be receiver. I noticed you had Baylor had reached out to one of those group of 5, like a 5'10" wide receiver. Baylor has had success with the undersized slot receiver. I think it was the Kent State receiver who you had mentioned out there. Any of those type players, Grayson? People right now are just desperate for information and names. Is there anybody that's grabbing your attention that Baylor's at least kind of in on right now?
Yeah, I mean, they're in on a few guys. I would say, you know, you mentioned high school recruiting. There was an interesting name that, you know, visited Baylor on the first day, which is Arkansas linebacker J.J. Shelton. So he was recruited by Baylor in the past, and obviously he comes back on campus. So you have that high school connection there. A good player, would probably fit in as a Mike for Baylor. And I think Baylor's in a pretty good spot there to land him. Now, as far as guys who I'm excited about, guys who I really like this cycle, I don't want to get into too many names, but I think there's this clear just path to Baylor having an awesome recruiting class at the wide receiver position. Dallas Baker is just doing such a great job there. And really, you can say you don't trust their evaluations on a lot of positions, but wide receiver, they have absolutely been money on pretty much every single transfer portal season. We saw it with Ashton Hawkins. We've seen it with Cole Wilson, Kobe Prentice. They've found some really good players out of the portal. They have a really interesting one visiting tonight into tomorrow, and that's Tulane wide receiver Shaz Preston. And he's an interesting one because he was actually recruited by Baylor when he transferred from Alabama to Tulane. And now it comes full circle this year after he really blew up this year for Tulane. He was their best receiver, kind of gave them a true alpha type. And now Baylor's back in on him, getting him on a visit. So he's definitely one I'm excited for. I think if Baylor got him, he would fit in really well at outside receiver, which is an area they absolutely have to address and absolutely have to hit on this portal cycle. I do think, looking around at some of the other positions, Auburn linebacker Robert Woodyard has been linked to Baylor, and he's been one that I've been really intrigued by. Baylor got to see him, obviously, in the first game of this year. Baylor's got a lot of problems at the linebacker position, I would say, after missing on Austin Romaine, the Kansas State transfer, as he committed to Texas Tech. And then, of course, Keaton Thomas leaving. You got to find a difference maker there. And I think Robert Woodyard would absolutely fit that. At that position. Great, really, really good athlete, really, really good player. So very intrigued by him. The edge position, I just mentioned it. I mean, Zeke Campbell going in was kind of the ideal one. Besides the Kansas State guys, he was kind of the guy that I looked at and said, Baylor really needs to find a way to land him. Because he's really good, 5.5 sacks for a bad Coastal Carolina team. He's a guy who's got great ties to, Ja'Cory Greer. He's got a great fit. He could be a great fit in Baylor's defense because he's 250 pounds. He's got good size to hold up against the run, but also be a really good pass rusher. So he definitely intrigues me, and he's one that I've kept my eye on for a while, as well as Ryan Davis, the edge from Kansas State, who I think his best football is ahead of him. He already has 6 sacks in his career, but I do think that going forward, these next 2 years for him are going to be his best years. So if you're able to get those two guys, I mean, you're feeling a whole lot better about Baylor's ability to get after the quarterback. So I would say that group right there is probably the main ones. There's plenty more. If you go to SicEm365, you can see all the names that I've been talking about. There's a lot of guys that Baylor's been linked to, that Baylor's targeting. One more, just when the portal opened that I really, really like, and I think he'd be a great fit for Baylor, and Baylor's been I think working pretty hard to get him on campus is Colorado wide receiver Draylon Miller. He was from Silsbee, was unbelievable in high school, a top 100 prospect, goes to Colorado, has his ups and downs, got injured last year, didn't play a ton, had to play some running back out of need for them. Just a really gifted playmaker with the ball in his hands. Kind of will remind you a little bit of Josh Cameron, except he fits in more in the slot than Cameron did, but the ability after the catch, the ability on special teams, Draylon Miller is definitely another one that I am very interested in, and I think Baylor's very interested in as well.
All right, I love all those, and I'm trying to think right now. Misery loves company. Like I'm trying to think of some of these other Big 12 teams that are, Iowa State was looking around and they don't have many players left, and Matt Campbell's sort of taking everybody with him. I think it was probably unfair to Joe Klanderman. You've been around Joe now, and you heard, I got to talk to him and everything. I think when you bring in a defensive coordinator, there's these expectations like, oh, he'll just bring his whole defense with him. And in this era, that there might have been an era where something like that worked. This era, the reason it doesn't work because everybody's getting paid. And like if A&M or Tech decide, you know what, I love this Romine guy. I think we can give him $2 million. Well, Baylor can't. Baylor's got to get tons of players. Tech may be in a position where let's just get 12 really good players. Like I wonder. I don't even know what game we're playing now, Grayson. If you think about it, like Tech begins every portal with seemingly somewhere in the neighborhood of like $15 million to spend on the portal. And it may even be a little bit more than that. Like tops, what do you think Baylor has, especially with those decommits that they had? To me, it feels like if Baylor's working with like 5 to 6 million, that would be pretty great. Does that sound right to you? If we're just trying to if we're trying to take a stab at what Baylor's working with in the portal compared to somebody like Tech right now.
Yeah, I think Baylor's working with a little more than you just said, but I think Tech is working with a lot more than you just said. I mean, they're paying a quarterback $5 million. So I don't think they're spending a third of what they're going to spend just on the quarterback position. I think they are
somewhere 20 to 25 million.
I would bet that's what I would bet for them. And I mean, you can see it though. Look at the guys that they're in on, the guys that they landed. I mean, they're landing the number 1 edge guy. They're landing probably going to land the number like 2 or 3 edge guy, the dude from Oklahoma State, Gregory. They're landing a really good defensive lineman as well from Washington. They got the best cornerback from UTSA. Like, they are loading up on the transfer portal, and they're going to go get probably receivers as well for Swordsby. I mean, they're just playing a different game right now than everyone in the Big 12, to be honest. You know, even BYU, who spent a lot last year, they divvied it up a lot with basketball. Tech is going all in on football. And I mean, you know, credit to them. They went on a big run. They have a big donor in Cody Campbell, who's also really tied to the university, who really cares about how good they are at football. And he's willing to pay up for it. And for that reason, they're being very, very competitive in the portal. And you're just seeing them land really good player after really good player.
Yeah.
And that's just not something that's realistic for Baylor right now. They're going to have to scout and develop a little bit better, whereas Tech really doesn't have to scout and develop at all. I mean, you just go look at the top rankings on 247 or on 3, and that's really all they have to do from a scouting standpoint.
Well, and Doug McNamee has to scout and develop more donors, right? I mean, we can sit around and go, we don't have a Cody Campbell. Well, not many schools do have a Cody Campbell. You know, but Baylor has plenty of rich people, plenty of successful people, but they got to bring more in. But I love the fact, Grayson, that we, in our minds, I cannot believe I fell for it. Like that somehow rev share was going to provide these guardrails, and college administrators fell for it. Like, they literally thought, okay, this is going to help, and we're all kind of playing the same ball game. Tech just sat there and laughed at that.
They did.
And meanwhile, Tech's biggest benefactor is trying to make the rules for all of college football, and he may actually have some pretty good ideas. I mean, I don't, but it is funny that everybody thought, okay, we got these guardrails, and you're right, they're playing a completely different game, and BYU kind of just picks and chooses. Like, oh, this year we'll be great at basketball, and we're still really good at football. And it's amazing, like, who stepped forward and who stepped back. And honestly, Baylor, with our religious ties, Doug McNamee talked that up like crazy. I mean, they need to, if they're going to lean into that, they kind of need to lean into it like BYU's leaned into it, and so anyway, I do want to transition real quick, and I want to get you back to it because I love having you on. Basketball wise, real quick. You and I both love it, and we both watch it. I know you watched a TCU game the other day. I mean, I think the problems were lack of physicality, getting whipped on the boards. Supposed to be a great offensive rebounding team, though TCU had more offensive rebounds. I think they had 19, and then TCU raced it up and down the floor, killed Baylor in transition. But I mean, I was hoping this would be a good transition team, if nothing else. I think they got beat in fast break points like 19-4 in that game. So, Grayson, again, I come to you for sort of positivity, because the truth of the matter is, and I'm somewhat a positive person, but knowing the Baylor schedule that they have coming up, and knowing even going to the TCU game, Lenardi had him like his first 4 out. This did not even resemble remotely a tournament team the other day, the team they played against TCU. And plus, Scott and them don't like Isaac Williams for whatever reason. Like, he's the most, from a point guard standpoint, he's got way more athleticism than Agbum, and yet he did something to piss off Scott early in the second half, and they just sat him for the final 15 minutes of the game, even though he's the only one of those smaller guards who has any chance of getting in the lane and finishing at the rim. Okay, so there's my rant. Where are you with all this?
I mean, I'm with you. I mean, getting into the lane, and listen, we talked about this in the offseason. Their position, that point guard position, is going to cost Baylor. It just is. And I think it's pretty apparent. And I like Isaac Williams. And yes, you could say, oh, why is he not playing more? Obi can't get in the lane and really struggles with more athleticism in front of him and length. He really struggles to get into the paint and get to his spots. But also it's like Isaac Williams has turnover problems. Isaac Williams is still not a great shooter. Isaac Williams is still not a complete point guard yet. And honestly, it's not really fair to him because he wasn't supposed to be in this position for Baylor. He wasn't supposed to play all these minutes. He's good. He's going to be a really good player, but I just don't think he's quite ready yet. And it just is a lingering effect of Robert Wright, what he did to this Baylor program in the offseason, leaving to BYU. He was who Baylor banked on. And then you went and looked in the portal, and Baylor decided that, there wasn't another point guard that they wanted to add. And ultimately, I do think that is going to cost them in the long run. It could cost them a tournament berth, even though I still think they're going to get there. We'll see. They're going to have to come out of this stretch that's going to be really difficult. They're going to lose quite a few more games here coming up. They're going to have to rebound from that. And we'll see how they rebound from kind of that first initial wave of negativity, that first initial wave of kind of being, beat on a little bit, because I do kind of expect that to happen. But I do think the rest of their schedule in Big 12 play is still workable. Like, they can still win a lot of these games. They're going to have to hold serve at home against the teams that they're even with or that they're supposed to beat. And if they can do all that, they can still make the tournament. But I think the point guard position is just going to put a cap on their season. And I think it was pretty easy to see that in the offseason, but I think we've gotten more examples of that as the season has gone on. They tried to fix their big spot with James Najee, but that's going to take a little bit of time. But I do think ultimately that position will get fixed a little bit more as he's able to play more. But the point guard spot, they just don't have another option to go to. The roster is what it is, and the guys that they have are what they are at this point. And I think it's just ultimately going to hurt them in these big games where they need their point guard to lead them. They need their point guard to find ways to get into the paint and create shots. They need their point guard to hit big shots or set up big shots. And I just don't know that they have the guys that are going to be able to do that consistently enough these close games come up in Big 12 play.
I almost wish now, looking back at the non-conference, that they had let Tunde or Cam almost try to run the team or experiment more with that, or try to because there's, and I've seen this over the years, it's pathetic when you watch an offense that can't get initiated. They've done the weave. Everybody does the weave thing now. Baylor's done it for years and years. They couldn't even really get into that the other day. And I mean, again, I know TCU is a top 25 team from a defensive ranking standpoint, not from an actual top 25 team, but still. You've got to get into and bring Grayson on. I got to see him when I'm talking to him, Kevin. I think I was embarrassed. I mean, I know, they were kind of having fun with it on ESPN. Bruce Pearl said something about it, but he was actually right. Like, that's embarrassing that we didn't have. You and I could have figured out a way to put some letters on Najee's jersey. I mean, that was it. You can't send a kid who's got that much attention, and then he gets booed. And then I thought, and I'll bring this up with Scott. Scott seemed a little surprised the other day that they this has been all the talk for like a week and a half. Everybody's killing this kid and killing Baylor for doing it. You thought the TCU kids weren't going to recognize him and go in on him, and it wasn't even that big of a deal, by the way. But I would say I don't know who is in charge of. You probably know this. The equipment and all, and I'm sure they're a great person, but you can't let that happen. I mean, that's to me, you send a poor kid out there with no name on his jersey. He was there. He was in town for a week before the game, like 5 or 6 days. So I give him a bad grade on that. And anyway, you can sense my frustration a little bit with this, but I don't know. We need Grayson. We need people like you who continue to find, and I appreciate all your coverage. We'll make sure we get this interview up and get it to Ashley so you can put it up on SicEm. I want to encourage people to follow, to sign up for SicEm365, because some of this stuff, you can see it on Twitter that you're putting up, but when like the full on analysis and the worry-o-meter, I think I saw you say, Grayson, that in the first 3 days of the portal, y'all had like sprinted past 100,000 views. So you're obviously doing something right. And while Baylor people are frustrated and not excited about Aranda, and all of that is true, they're still thirsty for news and everything. So anyway, I wanted to commend.
They are. Baylor fans are excited, man. They're excited still, even with the struggles that are going on, in recruiting. There was hope and optimism. And so the more information that gets out there and the more information that gets to Baylor fans, I do think the the better the push will be, and maybe the better vibes will be, especially if they're able to actually come through with a good portal class.
All right. Need a good the good thing would be landing a quarterback, because that would be, and then the next time we talk, I do want to get your take on, like, with Quinn coming in and Ed and Nate. It's like that was an interesting point you made. Like, the whole room might get irritated, but again, are we even in a position to worry about people getting irritated? Like, everybody's leaving. It's a very strange thing to know what you need to do in the portal, and then also know it's more than likely this won't be the staff moving forward. The whole thing makes it very awkward. And I'm sure even when you're having conversations with potential, I mean, it's coming up everywhere. And then people, the fans out there are like, wait, what did Caden Knighton's dad say during the season on Twitter? You know, and like, oh, wait, the uncle's on Twitter today responding to something I had, like, well, he's going to stay. He's going to stay. It's like, oh, the whole thing is kind of a mess. But thank you for your coverage, and we're really enjoying it. And I would recommend, I am on the premium membership, and that allows me to see what all the people are saying, all the great things. And y'all do a nice, yes, and you do a nice job of actually coming in there and visiting with the posters and stuff. But like, even on one thing you put up, like the Worryometer, probably you did it like a day ago or so, right? Within 24 hours, I think I looked a little while ago, and there were 7 pages of people. Yeah. Oh, I used to hate. I remember they would say, Matt, you've got to go in there and address the commenters. Like when I was at ESPN.com, and I was like, do I have to? But again, these are the people that are paying for this, so it's nice that you do it. Grayson, thank you, man. I appreciate it. I'm afraid this is cutting into your basketball time too. All this portal activity. So.
My middle schoolers got practice tonight, so we're good. I got some coaching to do tonight, but yeah, basketball's been good.
Do you have the middle school team doing the weave out front? Like,
oh yeah, 3-man weave and do a 3-on-2, 2-on-1. We're getting after it.
All right, Grayson, I appreciate you.
All right, see you, Matt.
All right, there he goes. Grayson Grundhoefer does a really nice job on SicEm365.